Before we begin our drift into the pages of history, please remember, this is an educational story designed for relaxation and sleep. It is a historical account of chemistry and medicine. It is not medical advice, and it does not encourage the use of any regulated substance. Always consult a medical professional for your health needs. Now let us begin. Close your eyes and let the noise of the modern world fade away. Imagine that we are traveling back, far back in time, before the lights of cities, before the noise of engines, to a place of absolute stillness. Visualize a vast, open field, bathed in the soft, silver glow of a full moon. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and green leaves. Here, in this ancient garden, rows upon rows of pale green stems stand tall in the moonlight, swaying gently in the night breeze. At the top of each stem sits a round, smooth pod, crowned with a small, star-shaped lid. This is the Papaver somniferum, the sleep-bearing poppy, a plant that has grown alongside humanity for thousands of years. Our story begins not in a laboratory, but in the cradle of civilization. In ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. It is the year 3400 BC. The sun beats down on the clay brick walls of the great city of Sumer. Here, inside cool, shadowed temples, scribes are pressing reeds into soft, wet clay, writing the world's first records in cuneiform. If we look closely at these clay tablets, we can see a specific symbol, a symbol they carved with great respect. They called this plant Hulgil, which translates to the plant of joy. For the Sumerians, this was a gift from the earth, primarily used for medicine, to treat the ailments of a hard life. Imagine the ancient farmers walking through the fields at dusk. They hold small, bronze tools. With steady hands, they make a very shallow cut, just a scratch on the side of the green seed pod. They do not harvest it immediately. They wait. Patience was the first ingredient. Over the course of the night, the pod would release a milky white sap, a latex that would slowly trickle down the side of the pod and harden in the cool night air, turning from white to a dark, sticky brown. This was raw opium, collected drop by drop, scraped off the next morning, and rolled into small cakes. From Sumer, this knowledge traveled. It moved slowly, carried in the saddlebags of camels, crossing the shifting sands of the deserts, traveling along the earliest trade routes, until it reached the banks of the Nile. In ancient Egypt, the Egyptians, famous for their medical knowledge, valued this substance highly. We know this because they wrote it down on the Ebers Papyrus, a 110-page scroll written around 1550 BC. It is one of the oldest medical documents in history. In its faded ink, priests and doctors described using the poppy to quiet crying children and to treat patients suffering from pain. It was a tool of mercy in a world without modern hospitals. The famous Spongia somnifera, or sleeping sponge, was used by healers, soaked in the extract and placed over the nose of patients to induce a deep, dreamless sleep before surgery. For thousands of years, this was the extent of human knowledge: a plant, a resin, and a crude medicine. The chemistry remained a mystery, locked inside the dark resin, waiting for someone to find the key, waiting for the age of science to arrive and unlock the pure, white crystal hidden within. Time flowed on like a slow river. Centuries turned into millennia. The empires of old crumbled into dust, but the poppy remained. It traveled from the banks of the Nile to the medical schools of Greece and the bathhouses of Rome. Physicians like Galen and Hippocrates wrote of its powers. They brewed it into teas and mixed it into wines. During the Renaissance, a Swiss alchemist named Paracelsus created a tincture he called laudanum, a mixture of opium and alcohol that became a staple in every medicine chest in Europe. But for all those thousands of years, the substance remained a mystery. It was still just a plant extract, raw and unpredictable, full of impurities and varying strengths. No one knew exactly what made it work. No one had ever seen the soul of the plant. Until the year 1804. The setting is a small, quiet town in Paderborn, Germany. Imagine a cobblestone street, damp with evening rain, faintly lit by the yellow glow of gas lamps. On the corner stands an old apothecary shop. The air inside smells of dried herbs, beeswax, and sulfur. Rows of glass jars line the wooden shelves, filled with roots, powders, and colorful liquids. Here, late at night, while the town slept, a young apprentice was working. His name was Friedrich Sertürner. He was only 20 years old, but he possessed a curious mind. He was not satisfied with the crude opium mixtures of the past. He believed that hidden deep inside the dark resin, there was a single, active ingredient, a specific chemical responsible for the sleep. Night after night, Friedrich worked in the back room, surrounded by beakers, flasks, and charcoal burners. It was a slow, tedious process. He took the raw opium and dissolved it in acid, then neutralized it, then precipitated it. He filtered the liquid again and again, stripping away the plant matter, the waxes, and the oils. He was looking for something that no human eye had ever seen before. Finally, after many long nights, he succeeded. At the bottom of his glass beaker, something settled. It was not dark or sticky like the raw plant. It was a fine, white, crystalline powder. It sparkled faintly in the candlelight. Pure and clean. Friedrich had done something revolutionary. He had isolated the very first alkaloid in history. He had separated the active medicine from the plant material. He looked at the white crystals and knew he needed a name worthy of their power. He thought back to the ancient Greek myths, to the god of dreams, Morpheus, the winged deity who could take any human form and appear in the dreams of sleepers. And so, Friedrich named his discovery morphium, which we now know today simply as morphine. This was the birth of modern pharmacology. For the first time, doctors could measure an exact dose. They no longer had to guess the strength of a plant. They had a pure substance, consistent and potent. Friedrich Sertürner published his findings. But for years, the scientific community ignored him. They could not believe that a simple apprentice had unlocked the secrets of the ancient poppy. It took more than a decade before the world finally recognized his achievement and awarded him the accolades he deserved. But by then, the white crystals were already beginning to change the world, finding their way into hospitals and battlefields, offering a silence deeper than any that had come before. The discovery of the white crystals was only the beginning. For decades, morphine was mostly swallowed, mixed into syrups, or dissolved in water. It had to travel through the stomach, a slow and winding path before it could reach the blood. But the march of history is often driven by invention, by the creation of new tools. In the year 1853, in the misty city of Edinburgh, Scotland, a physician named Alexander Wood was working on a problem. He wanted to deliver relief faster, more directly. He took a small, hollow tube of silver, sharpened to a fine point, and attached it to a glass cylinder with a plunger. It was the birth of the hypodermic syringe. For the first time, medicine could bypass the body's defenses and enter the stream of life instantly. This invention changed the relationship between humanity and pain forever. The combination of Sertürner's pure morphine and Wood's silver needle created a power that no doctor had ever possessed before, the power to extinguish suffering with the push of a plunger. This power arrived just as the world was descending into darkness. The middle of the 19th century saw the outbreak of great conflicts. The American Civil War began in 1861, followed by the Franco-Prussian War in Europe. Imagine the scene of the field hospitals, canvas tents flapping in the wind, the smell of smoke and rain, lanterns flickering low as surgeons worked through the night. In the leather satchel of every field doctor, nestled safely in wooden cases, were the glass vials and the silver needles. Morphine became the most precious supply in the army. It was more valuable than gold, more vital than gunpowder. Tens of thousands of soldiers, weary, wounded, and far from home, were introduced to the profound silence of the poppy. For the injured soldier, lying on a cot in a crowded tent, the injection offered an escape, a soft blanket of oblivion that covered the horrors of the battlefield. It was said that the medicine saved many from shock, slowing their hearts and calming their panicked breathing, allowing them to rest when rest seemed impossible. But as the wars ended and the smoke cleared from the battlefields, the soldiers returned home, and they brought the silence with them. They called it the army disease, or the soldier's sickness. Men who had survived the roar of cannons found they could not face the quiet of peace without their medicine. The poppy had been a faithful servant during the war, but in peace, it began to demand a price. Doctors started to notice that the wonder drug was not as simple as they once thought. The body grew used to it, craving the white crystals, needing more to achieve the same peace. It was the first hint of a shadow, creeping over the bright promise of scientific progress. The medical world began to realize that they had unlocked a door that could not easily be closed, that the gift of Morpheus was both a blessing and a bind, binding the patient to the cure with invisible chains. Yet, even with these rising concerns, the use of morphine continued to spread, becoming the gold standard against which all other pain relief was measured, deeply embedding itself into the fabric of modern medicine. As the 19th century drew to a close, the world was moving faster than ever before. Steam trains were crossing continents. Electric lights were pushing back the shadows of the night, and science was advancing at a breathtaking pace. But in the quiet corners of laboratories across Europe, chemists were wrestling with a difficult problem. They had the miracle of morphine, the most powerful painkiller ever known. But they also saw the shadow it cast, the dependency, the tolerance, the difficulty of stopping. And so began a new quest, a scientific race to modify the molecule, to keep the pain-killing power, but remove the danger. They wanted to tame the wild poppy, to perfect what nature had begun. In London, in the year 1874, a chemist named C.R. Alderwright was working at St. Mary's Hospital. He was experimenting with mixing morphine with various acids, boiling them for hours in his glass flasks, watching the vapors rise and condense. In one of these experiments, he combined morphine with acetic anhydride, a chemical relative of vinegar. The result was a new substance, chemically distinct from the original morphine. Wright recorded his findings, noted that the new compound was potent. But then, strangely, he moved on to other things. His discovery sat on the shelf, a sleeping giant, waiting in the dust of the archives. For 23 years, it was not until 1897, in the industrial heartland of Germany, that the notebook was opened again, this time by a chemist named Felix Hoffmann, working for the Bayer Pharmaceutical Company. Hoffmann was looking for a medicine to help with coughs. Tuberculosis and pneumonia were rampant in those days, and a simple cough could be a death sentence. He synthesized Wright's old compound, diacetylmorphine, and tested it. The results were astonishing. The workers at Bayer reported that it made them feel powerful, heroic, capable of anything. And so, the company gave it a brand new name, derived from the German word heroisch. They called it heroin. It is difficult for us to imagine today, looking back through the lens of history. But in 1898, heroin was marketed as a safe, non-addictive substitute for morphine. It was sold in pharmacies, advertised in medical journals, and even recommended for children with strong colds. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed that science had triumphed, that the perfect medicine had been found. Bottles of the syrup sat on bedside tables around the world, promising a restful night and a cure for respiratory ailments. But the honeymoon with this new wonder drug was short-lived. Physicians soon began to notice that patients were needing the medicine long after their coughs had gone, that the new cure was far stronger and harder to leave behind than the morphine it was meant to replace. The solution had become a bigger problem than the original puzzle. This realization marked a turning point in human history. For thousands of years, the relationship between humans and the poppy had been open, unregulated, based on tradition and folk wisdom. But as the 20th century dawned, governments began to step in. The era of the open apothecary jar was coming to an end. In the United States, this culminated in the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914. It was a piece of paper, signed in a quiet room, but it changed the world of medicine forever. Before this act, one could walk into a general store and purchase laudanum or morphine alongside grain and sugar. After the act, the substances were placed behind glass, locked away in heavy safes, accessible only with a doctor's signature. The poppy, which had once grown freely in the gardens of the ancient world, was now viewed with suspicion. It had been categorized, regulated, and controlled. The medical community had learned a hard lesson in humility. They learned that nature's chemistry is complex, and that there are no biological free lunches. The relief of pain always comes with a balance, a delicate scale that must be weighed with great care. And so, the white crystals moved from the counter to the clinic, becoming a tool strictly for the surgeon and the specialist, guarded by laws and watched over by the state, yet still remaining, to this day, the standard against which all other pain relief is judged. We have traveled through time, from the clay tablets of Sumer to the alchemists of Europe and the regulated shelves of the modern pharmacy. But there was one final mystery that remained unsolved for nearly all of history. Why, exactly, does the poppy work? Why does a simple plant, evolved millions of years before humans walked the earth, have the precise shape needed to unlock the doors of human perception and pain? It seemed like a coincidence too great to be accidental. The answer did not come until the late 20th century. In the 1970s, when researchers looked deeper than ever before into the microscopic landscape of the human brain, they discovered something profound, scattered across the surface of our cells, like tiny, microscopic keyholes, were specific structures, protein receptors waiting for a signal. They called them opioid receptors. It turned out that the human body, your body, was designed with these locks already in place. But why would nature build a lock if there was no key? The scientists realized that the body must produce its own key, its own version of the poppy's milk. And soon they found it. They named these internal molecules endorphins, a word that combines two meanings: endogenous, meaning coming from within, and morphine. Endorphins are, quite literally, the morphine within us. This discovery revealed a beautiful biological truth. The peace that the poppy offers is not something alien to us. It is a mimic, an echo, of the body's own system for mercy and comfort. When you run a long distance, or laugh until your sides ache, or feel the soothing touch of a loved one, it is this ancient, internal chemistry flowing through your veins, quieting the noise, and bringing a sense of well-being. The plant and the person share a molecular language, spoken in the silence of the cells. Today, despite all our synthetic inventions, despite the laboratories churning out new compounds, the original morphine remains the gold standard. It sits on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. It is kept in every hospital, in every corner of the globe, ready to serve as the final shield against pain. When science tries to improve upon it, it often finds itself circling back to the elegant structure that nature designed in the green fields of prehistory. It remains a tool of profound power, demanding respect, caution, and wisdom, a double-edged sword that can cut the cords of suffering, but also bind the unwary. And now, our journey through the ages is complete. We have followed the milky tear, from the bronze knife of the Sumerian farmer to the sterile glass of the modern vial. It is time to leave the history books behind and return to where we started. Let your mind drift back, away from the hospitals and the wars and the chemists, back to that quiet, ancient field under the silver moon. Visualize the poppies once more, thousands of them, standing motionless in the cool night air. Their petals are folded shut, sleeping. The wind has died down. The world is silent. There is no pain here, no worry, no racing thoughts, only the earth and the roots and the rest. You are part of this stillness. Your breathing is slow, like the slow turn of the seasons. Your body is heavy, sinking into the comfort of your bed. Just as the roots sink into the soil, the story is over. The history is written. The chemistry has done its work. Now, there is only sleep. The story of the poppy's silent drop is also the story of all human efforts to manage pain. And while morphine mastered the chronic agony of disease, there was another frontier that remained untamed: the sharp, momentary terror of the surgeon's knife. For thousands of years, surgery was synonymous with suffering, a last resort, undertaken with speed and witnessed with horror. Imagine the setting before the age of controlled sleep. A cold, brightly lit room, the sound of hurried voices, and the metallic scrape of tools. The patient was awake, fully aware. Their only comfort, a shot of raw brandy, or perhaps a dose of laudanum. But even the poppy could not quiet the terror of the immediate cut. The best surgeons were those who were the fastest. The speed of the blade was the measure of mercy. A good amputation might take 30 seconds. A terrible 30 seconds, etched forever into the memory of all present. The very thought of this era is enough to make the modern mind recoil. It was a time when courage was the only true anesthetic. The pain was the enemy, and the clock was the tyrant. But the dream of true oblivion persisted. For centuries, doctors experimented with fumes and vapors. In ancient times, mandrake root and henbane were burned, their smoke inhaled to cloud the senses. But these were unpredictable and often deadly. It was not until the early 19th century that chemists began to unlock the true potential of simple gases. Our scene now shifts from the silent library of the chemist to the spectacle of the American lecture hall. In the 1830s and 40s, young men were discovering the strange properties of two common substances: nitrous oxide, or laughing gas, and diethyl ether. These substances were initially used for public entertainment, known as frolics, where participants would inhale the vapor and perform bizarre, exaggerated acts. The spectacle was funny, but the true miracle was being missed. One night, during an ether frolic, a young man named Horace Wells, a dentist, watched as another participant stumbled and cut his leg deeply. Wells noticed something extraordinary. The man was laughing, not crying. He seemed completely unaware of his injury. A slow realization began to dawn on Wells. The gas did not just cause silliness. It caused insensibility. It created an insulating layer between the body and the mind. The next day, in December of 1844, Wells arranged for one of his own ailing teeth to be pulled. He inhaled the gas until his consciousness began to swim, and then instructed his partner to pull. When he awoke, the tooth was gone, and his first words were, "A new era in tooth pulling." But the true breakthrough was still to come. Wells' public demonstration was clumsy and failed to impress. The world needed a decisive, undeniable victory over pain. That victory came 2 years later, on the cold morning of October 16, 1846, in the surgical amphitheater of the Massachusetts General Hospital. This room would become known forever as the Ether Dome. Imagine the scene. The seats rise steeply, filled with skeptical doctors and students. They are waiting for a demonstration by a young Boston dentist named William Morton. Morton had been experimenting with ether, trying to perfect the dose and delivery. The patient was a man named Gilbert Abbott, scheduled to have a tumor removed from his neck. Morton administered the vapor through a glass globe he had designed. A tense silence hung over the room. The patient's eyes closed. The surgeon, John Collins Warren, waited patiently. Finally, Warren looked up and spoke the words that would change medicine forever. "Sir, your patient is ready." The knife descended. The operation proceeded. When it was finished and the patient awoke, Dr. Warren asked him how he felt. Gilbert Abbott replied, "I felt no pain." Warren, a man of great scientific reserve, turned to the stunned audience and announced simply, "Gentlemen, this is no humbug." The conquest of surgical pain had finally begun. The poppy had offered peace, but now the ancient element of air offered oblivion. The world would never operate the same way again. The discovery of true anesthesia in the Ether Dome and the isolation of morphine by Sertürner were the two great pillars upon which modern medicine was built. Today, in every operating room across the globe, these two principles work together in a symphony of control. The modern anesthesiologist is like the conductor of a complex orchestra. They do not simply put the patient to sleep. They use a precise balance of agents, one to create unconsciousness, the true oblivion, and another, often a descendant of the ancient poppy, to provide deep, sustained relief from the pain signals. They monitor the wave of the heart, the rise and fall of the breath, controlling the very edge of consciousness, to ensure that the patient experiences only the deepest silence and the profoundest rest. This control, this mastery over suffering, is the greatest ethical achievement of the modern age. It is the fulfillment of that ancient Sumerian desire to quiet the noise of sorrow. It is used not just in surgery, but in the compassionate work of palliative care, where the focus shifts from cure to comfort. In those final, quiet moments of life, the refined molecule, the white crystal born of a humble plant, becomes a vessel of mercy, a way to ensure that dignity and peace are maintained. It is the ultimate application of the scientist's promise to alleviate the most primal human fear, the fear of agony. And now, as we reach the very end of our long historical journey, we leave the bright lights of the hospital and the heavy weight of the history books. We return to the single, simple idea that began it all: the need for rest. Let the weight of every image, every chemical name, every historical date slip away from your mind, like grains of fine sand falling through your fingers. You are safe. You are secure. Your body is quiet. Your mind is resting. Imagine that you are floating in a vast, calm ocean. It is not deep or cold, but warm and completely still. There is no horizon, no time, no effort, only the gentle motion of the water, the rise and the fall of your own slow breath. In and out, you are being guided gently into the realm of Morpheus, the ancient god who shapes the sleep. Let your eyelids feel heavy, so heavy that lifting them is simply not possible. Your arms and legs are warm and weighted, sinking softly into the sheets beneath you. Every thought that tries to surface is diffused, disappears into the warm stillness. The poppy, the ether, the morphine, the science, all of it was a long, complex journey to bring you to this simple, perfect moment, the moment of absolute quiet. The silence of the centuries has finally reached you. The flower is sleeping, the field is still, and now, so are you. Rest deeply and rest well.